Good morning again, everybody. I will talk about the necessity to protect citizens and the environment against synthetic pesticides, remind on the legal obligations and alternatives, but it's very comfortable because the previous speakers have already said a lot. Just to say, Pesticide Action Network Europe, we're an office based in Brussels. We're around 50 staff, and we are science-based. So very often some people, some regulators see, oh, it's an NGO, it's just hippies working on pesticides, but we really look at the scientific publications, look at the available data, check the legislation, and then we do our work accordingly. Is this the, yeah. So very often I also hear people saying, oh, but here, you know, in Eastern Europe, citizens are not aware of the harm posed by pesticides, it's a problem and so on. So 2 years ago, we carried out a poll with the private Ipsos Institute, which is I think a French Ipsos carrying out polls, and so they frame the questions so that there is no bias among the people interviewed. And we did it in 6 EU countries, north, south, east, and west. And we were really amazed to see that the level of awareness across Europe is almost identical in every country. So I will not pass all the slides of all the questions we raised. You have the source here. The presentation will be available online. But one question was the use of pesticides in farming and food production is harming the environment. Do you agree, strongly agree, yes, no? And we saw that, especially in Poland, we have 80% of the people who strongly agree or tend to agree. The same is how concerned are you on the environmental impact of farming methods? And again, the results for Poland with fairly concerned or very concerned is very high. It's 83% of the respondents. And then how concerned are you about the healthiness of the food that you consume? And again, Poland is really very high. It's 86% of Polish people who give a lot of attention to the quality of their food. So I think that even though I often hear that there's a difference east and west, well, in the poll we don't see it, and people are really concerned about the impact of our farming methods on their health and the environment. So Pan-Europe is a member-based organization, so we have 50 NGOs, mostly national NGOs across Europe who are our members. We have 2 members in Poland. And our aim is to gradually replace hazardous pesticides with environmentally friendly alternatives. Poland is a very important agricultural country for the European Union with a production of a lot of important crops. And unfortunately, even if the previous presentations show the way forward, which is very important, the current situation is really bad in Poland. There is data in the Commission, in the Joint Research Center, unfortunately it's not yet published, showing that Poland is one of the EU countries with the highest pesticide load index. So the PLI, pesticide load index, is a way to measure the use of pesticide, but also the kinds of pesticide, the substances, the kind of substances that are used. And it is clear from the results from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission that in Poland, particularly high toxic substances are very much in use compared to other regions of Europe. What is public is this other study from the Joint Research Center from the European Commission showing the toxicity of the use of pesticides on water organisms. And we can see that Poland is not a good pupil, let's say. It's not the worst. We can see that there are regions where it's worse. But Poland is quite homogeneously using pesticides that are particularly toxic to water organisms. So why do we need to phase out pesticides? I would say that the first group that we need to protect is our farmers and people living in rural areas. And this is really something that is highly problematic, is that when we speak to farmers as an NGO, well, first they don't like us, so we need to show them that we like farmers because they're the basis of our health. But then is that among the farming community, there is all these messages saying, no, but if pesticides are authorized, they are safe, don't worry. But this is not what science tells us. Science tells us that people who are exposed to pesticides are more sick, even if they are authorized, even if we have a very strict regulatory system, it's not enough. So it takes a lot of time to identify pesticides that are too toxic, and regularly the European Commission, jointly with member states, decide to ban pesticides, but they have been on the market for decades. Very often they're for 30 years, 40 years on the market, and then we realize, oh, sorry, they are carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, and so on. And this was not identified by the system that we have. Pesticides are among the main source of exposure to endocrine disruptors because we consume food with pesticide residues, because bystanders, citizens living in rural area are much more exposed, and endocrine disruptors lead to a series of diseases. We have to know that even if our system is one of the strictest in the world, for the moment, the evaluation of the long-term toxicity, the toxicity if you're regularly exposed to pesticides, formulations, meaning the active substance plus all the coformulants that are directly sprayed in the field and on our food, is not assessed by regulators. In the same way, the neurotoxicity of pesticides, you know, most insecticides are neurotoxic. Many of them are gradually being banned, but there is no evaluation of what's the impact of neurotoxic pesticides on human health. And the same with the coformulants. So as I was saying, for instance, you have glyphosate as an active substance, and then you need coformulants to produce Roundup formulations. Coformulants are currently not assessed because regulators do not receive information on their toxicity by the producers, and the same with mixtures, exposure to mixtures of pesticides. So as I was saying, Panura were science-based, and all the scientific studies showing, that are studying epidemiological studies, the impact of chronic exposure to pesticides show that it leads to an increase in the risk of developing a series of diseases. Among the farming community, there is a higher risk of developing, for instance, neurodegenerative diseases like the Parkinson's disease. In France, in Italy, and in Germany, the Parkinson's disease is recognized as a labor disease for the farming community. The risk posed by residues in food is also very often underestimated. Very often when a pesticide is new, the authorized maximum residue level is set at a certain level, and then you see that when you get new scientific publications from university research, it's being reduced because we realized that it was not safe enough. And then also pesticide metabolites heavily contaminate our groundwater. Unfortunately, in the EU, we do not protect enough groundwater, and we see it especially now. There's a class of pesticides which are PFAS pesticides. It's more than 35 substances that degrade into one metabolite, which is called TFA, trifluoroacetic acid, which is extremely persistent, extremely mobile, and it goes directly to our groundwater. And it's such a small molecule that drinking water companies cannot filter them. And it's piling up because it's a real forever chemical. We don't know if it has a half-life. We don't know if it biodegrades. And there is evidence of toxicity to humans. So we also need to phase out synthetic pesticides, of course, to protect biodiversity. In my view, philosophical view, to protect it per se. Also because it's a legislative requirement, but also because we need biodiversity to produce food. We need what we call ecosystem services. All these services biodiversity gives to humans, be it pollination, organic matter decomposition, soil fertility, natural pest control. They are heavily harmed by the use of pesticides, and on the long run, if we destroy soil organic matter, if we destroy pollinators, of course, it will harm the profitability of farms on the long run. Furthermore, having healthier agroecosystems lead to healthier crops. For instance, we see that farmers who are not necessarily organic farmers, but who go very far into integrated pest management and reduce very, very much pesticides, they have very healthy soils, and they say we rarely have fungi problems because we do rotations and our healthy soils are able to neutralize the fungi pests. So, what do we ask to the EU and to the Polish government? So, what's really important is to make sure that we give priority to health and the environment. This is in the EU legislation. This has been confirmed several times by the EU Court of Justice. But we saw in the recent vision for agriculture and food that they were discussing about maybe starting to not ban pesticides in case it is considered that there are no alternatives. This is not part of the legislation. This is one thing. And second thing, I think that we heard a lot about biocontrol, but also organic farming shows us that there are alternatives to pesticides when they are banned. Every time a pesticide is banned or there are discussions to ban it, well, almost every time we see letters or communications from the pesticide industry saying, oh, but if you ban, for instance, mancozeb, we will have a drop of 50% in the yields in potatoes. We need neonicotinoids, we will have a drop of 60% in rapeseed oil harvest. And then what we see from Eurostat figures is that the yields remain exactly the same after banning these substances because alternatives exist. As I said, currently there are no studies on long-term toxicity to humans, to farmers in the first place. This is mandatory by law, and we ask it to be implemented. In the same way, coformulants are not properly tested, and coformulants are really the Pandora box. There are more or less 500 pesticides authorized in Europe, including biocontrol, and there are thousands of coformulant substances. Many of them are highly toxic to humans, but regulators do not have data because they do not ask for it to the pesticide industry, even though the law obliges them to do it and gives them this possibility. And then we ask Poland to, and also all member states, to phase out, to ban PFAS pesticides because they, as I said, heavily contaminate groundwater. They are, most of them, very toxic to human health and the environment. And we have enough data now and the legal possibility to ban them. So Mr. O'Connor talked about the Sustainable Use of Pesticides Directive, the SUD. It's an old directive. I'm sorry, the letters are too small. It's an old directive, but it's a very good directive. It aims at really protecting citizens and the environment from direct exposure to pesticides, and also showing the way forward towards integrated pest management. But the problem is that it has been badly transposed into national law. There was never a check by the European Commission if it was well transposed into Polish and other national or regional legislations. And then it's also poorly implemented. We see it normally as integrated pest management is mandatory for farmers since 2014. We should have seen a gradual reduction in the use of synthetic pesticides, but it's not the case. The SUD, so this directive says that, well, imposes member states to take the necessary actions to prevent citizens from direct exposure to pesticides, meaning that there should be broad buffer zones close to people's houses, close to schools, close to playgrounds, and so on. It's not the case in most member states, including Poland. It's really a pity. But it's also for rural area. And in rural area, as we will say, I will discuss it afterwards, in urban area, we need to develop pesticide-free towns. I will mention it afterwards again. Member states have to establish national action plans, as Mr. O'Connor said. And integrated pest management is the norm, where synthetic pesticides have to arrive as a last resort after all other possibilities, preventative measures have been put in place. Yeah, I'm really sorry. I don't know why the slides got shrunk like this. Yes, and another reason, apart from the fact that we need to protect people's health, why we need to move towards IPM is that there are less and less synthetic pesticides on the market. Because with all the information we gather over time, they are being banned one after the other. And the fact there are less substances, synthetic pesticides on the market, the number of resistances is increasing. So now, since already a few years, pesticide producers sell mixtures of pesticides, mixtures of 2, sometimes 3 active substances, insecticides or herbicides, to compensate. But inevitably, it leads to even more resistance and also more combined toxicity to humans. So it's really mandatory. Well, I mean, we don't have a choice. We need to transition and support our farmers in the transition. So I was mentioning pesticide-free towns. Already 5 European countries, some of them since more than 10 years, have on the entire territory only pesticide-free towns. It's prohibited to use pesticides to maintain pavements, to maintain playgrounds, in parks and so on. And there's a broad knowledge available. So there's no reason not to expand it to the entire EU. It's mandatory under the SUD to protect people from direct exposure. So there's no reason to keep spraying playgrounds where kids will play the next day with pesticides. It doesn't make sense. We also need to have a ban on private use of synthetic pesticides. Citizens do not have protective equipment, they do not have training, so there's no reason to expose them to pesticides that are particularly toxic. Developing pesticide-free towns is also a positive message because we explain, public authorities produce leaflets, explain to citizens why we go pesticide-free to better protect their health, but it requires technical support. We saw it in the countries where there was this transition. They had to put in place the needed technical support to become pesticide-free. Then in agriculture, as we already discussed previously, integrated pest management is mandatory, and it has to focus on prevention. And preventative methods is knowledge intensive. There are all kinds of preventative methods. It's very well documented. And it's important to develop a healthy agro-ecosystem to favor living soils, to promote beneficial insects that will then contribute to protecting the crop. And there is mounting, fortunately, already for a few years, mounting scientific evidence showing that by implementing high-level integrated pest management, farmers manage to reduce by 50 to 80% their pesticide use, while maintaining the similar level of profitability, which is really the most important for farmers. And it's possible to, by implementing IPM, to completely phase out insecticides in arable crops, thanks to crop rotation and giving more shelter to natural predators. Likewise, in orchards, there are many alternatives with mating disruptions, pheromones, to stop using completely insecticides. As I said, IPM is knowledge intensive. This is the IPM pyramid that we developed jointly with IBMA, the International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association, and IOBC, the International Organization of Biological Control. And it shows that chemical control is really almost nothing in crop rotation. There's all the preventative measures, and then we use mechanical weeding, and then biological control, and only as a last resort, if the rest, all the prevention did not work, use chemicals. And for the moment, unfortunately, what we see is that very often this pyramid is used upside down, starting with chemistry. As Mr. O'Connor said, we need to have much more developed farm advisory services, public advice, independent advice, high-level advice given to farmers. We need demonstration farms like this IPM Works network Mr. O'Connor referred to. It's extremely efficient when it's a farmer talking to a farmer, much more than when it's a public servant or even an NGO person. It's much better when it's farmers speaking to farmers. I'm almost done. On biocontrol, the vision for agriculture and food is, in our view, disappointing in terms of objectives of pesticide reduction. And it really pushes forward biocontrol. Pan-Europe sees biocontrol as a really important additional tool to support pest control for farmers. But we also think that we shouldn't think of only replacing chemistry by biological control, because, and this is what the biocontrol producers say themselves, you cannot just replace one substance by one biocontrol. It needs to be integrated into an integrated pest management program. And also, if you have living organisms that you put on your field and then you spray with a chemical pesticide, being the active substance or the coformulants, might kill the biocontrol agent you put on the field. We need to have more research, to favor research. There was in the past a lot of money put in synthetic pesticides, in GMOs, and it's really important that now public authorities support this transition. As I said, it needs to be part of an IPM plan, and we are, as Pan-Europe, favorable to have more biocontrol products on the market as soon as possible. But as was already said, we have to properly assess the health and environmental risk. If you spray a biocontrol agent that kills crop insect pests, there's a high probability that it will also interact with beneficial insects, being pollinators or others, and this needs to be properly assessed. Finally, and this has nothing to do with crop protection, but it's really important, it's part also of the vision for food and agriculture from the European Commission. We ask to end double standards. We need to, what we see is that when we ban a pesticide in the EU to protect European citizens and European environment, our factories keep producing them and exporting them to third countries. And then in turn, we import back this food from these countries who keep using pesticides our farmers cannot use. And then we have residues of these banned products on our food. So what we ask, this puts our farmers in an unfair competition, and in parallel, citizens, the environment, peasants, farmers are exposed in third countries to these pesticides. So we ask to halt the exports of EU-banned pesticides, and when we decide to ban a pesticide, to automatically reduce the maximum residue level allowed in food in Europe, but also in imported food, to put everyone on a level playing field. And with this little picture of what pesticide-free towns can look like, I thank you very much for your attention.